Hi, in this chapter we are going to look at the sidelines of the 6th bishop g5 knight. As the players have discovered some issues in the main lines, discovered that black has a lot of different ways of handling it. They've started looking for other ways, and by now there are quite a few. And besides those that have been already tried, I also tried to look for the new sidelines and new ideas for white that haven't yet been played. And I found quite a few actually. So this chapter is going to be a lot larger than I initially thought. But let's jump into it. So e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4 takes, opens Sicilian, knight f6, knight f3, a6, and the knight of, and here bishop g5. As you know from the introduction video to bishop g5, knight of, I recommend here the move e6. Already here there is a choice. So the main move here is f4, but there are quite a few options. So let's look at them one by one. Now the move queen e2 is not very good here. The idea is that we play bishop e7, and those who watched the introduction chapter know that after f4 there is h6, bishop h4, and knight takes e4 a trick when knight e4 is met by bishop h4 and bishop takes e7 is met by knight takes c3. That said, let's look at it in some more detail here. So queen e2, bishop e7. Note, by the way, that you might encounter queen e2 quite a bit, because queen e2 is a good move after the move knight bd7 here, and also is a good move after f4, knight bd7. So some of the white players might play queen e2 here, and some might play it after f4, bishop e7, and here queen e2, which transposes to the 7th queen e2, bishop e2, and now f4. Besides f4, white can play two other moves. The long castle is there, but then there is knight takes e4 again, and again the same thing. Knight e4, we've got bishop g5, and bishop e7, we've got knight c3, bishop d8, knight e2, and here white is fortunate that he can recapture with the knight, and after king d8 regain the d6 pawn, and this position is reasonably balanced. Black is very comfortable, but white regained the pawn, so should not be in too much trouble. King 7 b2 b5. Here I add variation. Black just develops the pieces comfortably. Knight to d7 or c6. Nothing to worry about at all. The most challenging move is the move h4. White takes care of the knight takes e4 threat, protects his g5 bishop. Now knight e4 obviously pointless because we just lose the piece. Here we play h6. Also b5 is playable, as I mentioned. After a3, bishop b7, long castle, knight d7, we have a very complex position, but a pretty decent version for black. White has played h4 quite early. It's not the most useful move, of course. It is not harmful, but f4 and then g4 are a little bit higher when it comes to priorities. Also, the knight on c3 is a little bit vulnerable to rook c8 takes c3. Sacrifices, excuse me, let me fix these arrows here. But h6 is what I recommend as the main line. Here I look at two options, the bishop e3. This is not very good because the e4 pawn is going to be hanging in some lines. After b5, a3, bishop b7, white has to waste time on f3, and now we play knight bd7, long castle, and rook c8. In general, this is a very standard development scheme for these structures. The pieces are all very harmoniously placed. Currently we want to take on c3, and if white defends the knight after queen d2, we can consider a few different options. We can always bring knight to c4 via b6 or e5, and in this particular case also push for d5, and b4 is a thing, and white has just wasted quite a lot of moves, frankly, on the move h4, and also queen e2 and queen d2. Just while we played only the natural moves, so this should be good for black. Bishop d2 is more, it's just better. b5. Now long castle, we have b4. The knight has nowhere good to go. b1 is quite set, and on a4 be hit by bishop d7. So white should play a3, and here we have e5. Unusual move, wasting one move on e6 and then e5, but white also wasted a bunch of time here with all sorts of different moves. So e5 is justified. After knight f5, we take and play knight c6. Knight is heading towards d4, and this position is good. I look at a long castle, knight d4, queen d3, and now a thematic idea. In general, by the way, when I look at these variations, it is not necessarily for you to remember them in these particular positions, because I don't expect you to encounter this position, for example, in your games. I think the odds of that are really low, and I certainly don't think you have to remember. But by showing all these sidelines and different variations, showing them quite far, I do hope to give you sort of an arsenal of different weapons and ideas that you could apply in different positions. And so here is one such case where black is going for an idea that you should always be aware of before it is before an a5. So black sacrificed the pawn in order to try and open the queen side, and after b5, white tries to keep the queen side closed. We push a4, excuse me, and our a pawn becomes a headache here. This particular position after king b1, a3, b3, a2, pushing the pawn all the way down the board after king a1. The pawn is not obviously going to promote, but we do have to realize that whenever our bishop will reach the long diagonal, which will happen one day, and then the situation will be quite deadly for white king, and so white pieces are tied down. His queen is defending the c2 pawn, and yeah, after d5, rook c8, something will happen. Bishop b4, putting the pressure on c3 knight. White position is it's just very dangerous. On move 13, there is also the move g4. And now again, we go knight d4, queen d1, rook c8. Rooks belong on c8 in the Najdorf. Is the semi-open file that we always play along. So here bishop g2, and now rook c4. Rook c4 is a very strong move. The rook applies some pressure on the fourth rank and gives the room for the queen on c8 to keep pressuring the c file, and the queen from c8 is also going to target the f5 and g4 pawns. Now g5 is met by knight d7. White would like to play some active moves like queen h5 or knight d5, but he cannot because the c2 pawn is hanging in all these variations. So this is very good for black, and after castle we play queen c8, and we have lots of ideas here. First of all, the f5 and the g4 pawns are quite weak. We'd like to undermine them with h5 or g6, and also queen c8 allows for this bishop d8, b6 idea, and this is this bishop d8 maneuver is something we'll see in a lot of different Najdorf positions. Also a very typical regroup, activating the star squared bishop. That is for move queen e2 and h4, and here f4, as I mentioned, is met with h6. I also give the option of b5, but first let's look at h6. Now bishop h4, knight e4 is very good, as we know. Bishop e7, knight c3. Here queen e6 has actually never been played, but this is the best attempt at equalizing. White wins back the pawn in a spectacular way. After we take the queen, white takes the queen, take the bishop, take the knight. Lots of trades happened, and after rook f8, obviously it's black who is slightly better thanks to these doubled c pawns, but the material at least is equal. After knight c3, white usually plays queen c4, trying to be smart. Now if we take with the queen, the bishop is hanging, but we just take with the king, and after queen c3 we have an extra pawn, and our king is in no danger whatsoever. After rook e8 we just drop back to f8, long castle king f8, we just have an extra pawn, and so this knight takes e4 trick just gives us an advantage. After h6, white has to take on f6, therefore now we have this tremendous dark squared bishop here. Position is just very good for black. Long castle, queen c7, and we are threatening to play knight c6, opening the diagonal for the bishop. It's important that white doesn't get to close it with e5, so that's why we played queen c7, controlling the c5 square, and knight c6 is coming, while after queen d2, which is the best move, trying to apply pressure on the d6 pawn and stop knight c6, we prepare knight c6 with the move bishop d7. And the variation continues with king b1, knight c6, knight f3. Quite remarkably, I once reached this position in a blitz game, and here long castle is very nice pawn sacrifice. Also possible to go bishop e7 back, but I like this pawn sack after queen d6, rook d6. G5 is a good move. We're fighting for these dark squares here, and FG obviously would be quite bad for white. We would have control over the e5 square and this monster bishop on f6. And after g3, we doubled white pawns, and after rook a g8, white has weak c pawns and also the weak f4 pawn with threatening to take and enter with the rook on g4. So black has more than enough compensation for the pawn here and is a very comfortable endgame. That said, this queen e2 is a bad move also because of 8b5. I give this as well. Long castle. Now again we have b4. The knight is has nowhere to go, and after a3, nowhere good to go. Obviously, I mean on b1 it's pretty bad, and on a4 it will be hit again by bishop d7. And after a3, bishop b7, long castle, knight d7. Here we have pretty good version of things, and after basically the idea is that this position is a theoretical position with black queen already on c7 from some other variation, with knight b7 variation, the Gelfand system. There the queen is already on c7, and here it's completely different because we save that tempo and we'll use it for rook c8 when we'll threaten to take on c3, and that's why in this move order this is just a very good position for black. So after g4, h6, bishop h4, we have rook c8, and yes, now with queen on d8, rook takes c3 is just a monstrous threat. In general, always doubling these pawns when the king is on the queen side, very dangerous for white. It's a thematic idea. So Sicilian player should of course always be aware of this exchange sacrifice. And here after bishop e1, trying to protect from the sacrifice, you can play g5, fighting for these dark squares. Another typical resource, something you should always be aware of, fighting for these dark squares. On the king side, this f4, e5, g5 squares, and after f5, we can push with e5 and maybe 3 h5, and white is unable to maintain his king side pawn structure, and black just has very good position. This d5 square is well controlled by our pieces. If need be, knight can come to b6, and our king is very safe behind this closed pawn center. So two ways actually against this queen e2, just a bad move. Not sure why I gave two ways, but I did, so there you go. Two other systems that do make sense. One is the f3 setup. That's idea played by Magnus Carlsen. White can also start with queen d2 and then go for f3, very similar. So the idea is to play sort of an English attack, which is the f3, bishop e3, queen d2 setup, but with the bishop on g5. The point is that if white plays the English attack immediately with f3, then we will, as you will find out, play with e5. And by playing bishop g5 first, white is making us commit to the e6 pawn structure, and now he wants to play the English attack. That said, the bishop on g5 is worse placed than it is on e3. It comes in the way of white's on g4, g5 idea. And so this is not an ideal system. Quite remarkably, Magnus Carlsen played against Vashila Graf. In the period when Vashila Graf was playing the e6 setup against the 6th f3 as well. So I don't really understand why Magnus decided to play it against that particular opponent. But it certainly makes sense against us, because we are usually not playing the Scheveningen structures. As you will know, I will be mostly recommending the e5 systems against most of the variations. So this makes sense against us, but this is fine for black. I have a good look at it. So we start with bishop e7. There are, by the way, many systems that black can choose from, obviously. There is also the knight c6 system, similar to the classical Sicilian, where white has already committed to the move f3, which is highly committal. But I recommend bishop e7, queen d2, and b5. Against Carlsen, the game that I played, it was a must-draw game for me. I was leading in the match, and I had to not lose the last game. And I, after e4, obviously, I played the Najdorf. I had a lot of faith. I still have a lot of faith, obviously, in the Najdorf. And so I don't really care whether it's a must win or a must draw game. I think knight is a perfect weapon in all these cases. And so in that game I played castle first, fearing that after b5 there could be a4, undermining our queen side, but it works out fine for black, so that's not a problem. But we can start with b5 first. So let's look at a4 indeed. Now there are a few options. We can play b4 after knight a2, e5. It's a typical sequence. So first we kick away the knight from c3, and now the d5 square is no longer under its control. We kick the other knight with e5, and after knight b3 here we have to play very, very dynamically as b4 pawn is hanging, bishop e6. And the idea is that knight b4 we've got knight e4 trick. And after fe4 there is bishop g5, and after bishop e7 there is knight d2, bishop d8, knight b3. So typical tactics. So white can win the pawn with bishop f6 first, bishop f6, knight b4, but now we've got this tremendous bishop g5, queen c3, short castle, and white's king is very strong. It cannot, very weak. It cannot castle long because of this bishop. It's not going to be able to castle short because of queen coming to d6, and black has a fantastic compensation, and I've drawn here a lot of arrows. We'll play a5, develop our knight from b8 to c6 or d7, just a very good position for black. So this works out, but also after a4, simply b takes a4, knight takes a4, and short castle. The position like that is fine for black. We do have a sort of a isolated weak pawn on a6, but white spent a lot of time on moves like bishop g5 and f3, and he needs to still get this bishop out and castle, and that takes a lot of time. And in the meantime, we should be able to generate counterplay in the center. There is the d5 push in the center, as well as e5 push. Just the combination of white going for bishop g5 and then the English attack with f3, and then switching to play for positional play on the queen side with this a4, just a little bit too much. So black is doing quite well here. Instead of a4, white can play a3, stopping b4, but that's not very flexible here. We go for bishop b7, long castle, and knight c6. Of course, black can also play for the different setup with castle, knight b7. Very healthy, but I like this move, knight c6 here, and we have sort of a good version of these classical Sicilian variations where knight is on c6, but the bishop is on b7, not on d7, where it's even better placed, and white does not have good follow-up here, because again this g4, g5 is not so easy. So the best move is to drop the bishop back, losing the whole tempo. If white grabs the pawn with takes, bishop f6, bishop f6, knight c6, bishop 6, and queen d6, here black can always go into the endgame. Like such endgames are after takes are fine, because the bishop pair compensate fully for this pawn majority. This bishop is just tremendous. We'll just protect our bishop and have all these dark squares to bishop e5 and generate some counterplay on the king side very easily. But queen c8 is even stronger. Black is just doing very well in the middle game as well. So this is not a good attempt here. Bishop e3 is the main move, and after castle, g4, knight d4, bishop d4. We have a position which is sort of a common position, common Sicilian position, but white has wasted the time with bishop g5, bishop e3, and in Sicilians especially, though probably in most of the chess openings, but especially in the sharp opening, unbalanced opening as Sicilian, especially with the opposite side castling, these tempos are really a big deal. So if one side lost tempo, it means he's going to be one move too short for something. That's just how chess works. And here, indeed, if you start analyzing, black can go for one of the thematic ideas, like bishop c6, queen b8, a5, b4 is one, bishop c6, rook b8, a5, b4 as well, or even d5, which is very strong here. In all these complications, the fact that we've got that extra tempo is just gives us good karma, and it all works out. That is for a3. Long castle, move 9 is is more principled. Here we can try to use the fact that white hasn't played a3 and go for the b4 plan, or also just develop with bishop b7 and knight d7. Let's look at both options. So first we look at the b4 line. So for that we need to first push h6, kick the bishop back. After bishop e3, now we go b4. Knight ce2 is met by e5. Here again, common idea to first kick this knight, then kick that knight. Here after knight b3 we go a5 and a4 and so on. Black is just doing very well. White hasn't even started his play on the king side, while we are already coming with a4 and the knight on b3 has nowhere to go. Knight f5 is main. Now we take, play knight c6 and go d5. And again, white is just very slow on the king side, while we are already coming with our play in the center. That's for knight ce2. Knight a4 is the main move. Now we can play queen a5, and it seems that these complications lead to some sort of a move repetition in two different strange ways. One is knight b6, sacrificing a piece. Very spectacular idea. Takes knight e6. Very, very nice, but white is just going for perpetual after queen a5, knight g7, king f8, bishop h6. We can play, for example, knight g8, hitting the bishop, and white has to repeat moves with knight e6, double check, king e8, knight g7. We have to go back, and it's a move repetition. And after queen a5, white can also play b3, bishop d7, and again he needs to do something brilliant here, and that is knight f5. Another spectacular piece. Second after ef, the idea is to sort of trap the queen for a move repetition, bishop b6, bishop d4. So yeah, these two are move repetitions, but obviously black has plenty of options, so we by no means forced to go for it. We can play knight bishop b7. Also, these move repetitions, I think white has to really know these things. I don't think he can find them over the board. It's very complicated. But there's the option of bishop b7, move 9 after h4, which is move white usually plays. Knight b7 and king b1. Black has a lot of different ideas, a lot of corresponding games, like castle. White plays a3 usually, stopping the b4 push, followed by d5. And after a3, there are different ways of playing, but I like in general as a concept, in these positions, as a concept, I like going for b4 plans. I find it more direct than playing on the c file once the pawn is on a3. So here I recommend rook b8. After g4, white is also obviously trying to do something on the king side. We can play bishop a8, which is a slower move. There are a lot of complications here, very messy stuff. But I recommend d5. If white takes on d5, we take. These positions is fine. Knight d5, knight d5, bishop d5. These pawns are hitting nothing. One's knight left f6 square, so our king is pretty safe. But we can eventually target this a3 pawn by pushing b4. The main move after d5 is bishop f6, knight f6, and g5. White is kicking our knight away, and then knight will not defend the d5 pawn any longer. Here we go knight h5, and after ed, I propose a very strong way of playing. A very dynamic way. So first we grab the bishop, knight g3, rook g1, knight takes f1, all with the tempo, rook gf1, and now we don't lose time recapturing the pawn on d5, because then white would have all sorts of ideas connected with knight f5. But we go for b4. We open that b file and diagonals for our bishops, and don't really care about pawns. After a b4, bishop b4, the b file is by the way open. There are still bishops, but there is some danger for the white king already, and after d takes e6, we sacrifice the second pawn, play queen c7 simply, and we want to play bishop d5 next. When the x-ray from the b8 rook to the b1 king becomes very relevant, and here black is objectively doing quite well. The engine also, upon some thought, starts to appreciate black's compensation. And these are two ways against the Magnus setup with bishop g5 and f3. Queen d2 is identical, I believe. After bishop e7, white has to play f3 now, or long castle b5 f3, both transpose. There is an extra option in h6, but it's not that simple. So after bishop e3, we grab the bishop with knight g4, but here's not so easy. After bishop f6, queen f6 having taken on f6 with the queen and not the bishop, we have slightly discoordinated our pieces. After long castle, white will push with f4, and this is not as easy as I'd like it to be. So after queen d2, I recommend to just play bishop e7, and then after b5 next, transpose to the Magnus system. Besides queen e2, which is a bad move, and f3, which is Magnus system, there is the move queen f3, slightly unharmonious compared to the f4 queen f3 system, where the pawns in general should be in front of the pieces, the little soldiers. But it has a point. Queen f3 has been played by Jan Nepomniachtchi at a very high level in the Russian Championship for a few years ago already. And there are some ideas here, so we should address the system. Here I recommend knight bd7. Yes, I mentioned that there is no need for bishop e7 because these knight takes e4 tactics, they no longer work. They only work with the queen on e2, obviously because of this knight takes e3 intermezzos. After queen f3, knight bd7, long castle is what I place. We play queen c7. This move is needed. The idea is that we want to play a b5, and after e5, hitting the rook and the knight, we have this bishop b7 intermezzo. So queen c7 is always a move we need in these positions. And now white already has a few options. So g4 is a little bit odd. Without the pawn on f4, it looks a little bit strange. After b5, again e5 never works because of bishop b7. a3 we can go for rook b8, going for quick b4. And after bishop takes f6, it's interesting to take with the pawn because we keep our center closed. We threaten b4. We want to focus on the queenside play, and without white's pawn being on f4, there is no f5 push, and so our pawns are they remain untouched, and we have a very comfortable position here with very good attacking prospects. The g4 not very logical, also not really the point of this line. Queen g3 is possible. The idea is that after b5 there is bishop takes b5 sacrifice. Here if white plays a3 instead on move 10, we have rook b8. We push quickly with b4. It's a good version of things for black. Bishop d3 will transpose to 9. Bishop d3 after bishop e7, rook h1. And bishop b5 is the principal way here with the queen on g3. We take, knight takes, and queen b7 is the best move. As you will see if you consider other alternatives. Now queen b7 definitely the best move. And here we have to check all these captures. So in general, these sacrifices are possible. So white gets 3 pawns for the piece, but it mostly depends on whether white can consolidate. And in endgame it's one thing, 3 pawns, but in the middle game with all these open files on the queen side, these pawns are not too relevant yet. So it just depends on how it plays out. Here there are 3 moves. So there's bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, and knight d6. Takes, white threatens mate on d8. We play bishop d7, rook d4, and here we have to chase the queen in order to castle short. Rook a6, queen c5, rook c6, queen a3, rook a6, and white has to just keep repeating, otherwise we'll castle short and have a good position. Again, these 3 pawns are worth nothing in the middle game for this piece. So that's bishop f6, and knight takes d6. We can take and play rook a6. Without bishop f6, knight f6 included, there is no mate here, and once the queen leaves, we will just castle, have a good position. Rook takes d6 is the main move, fancy move. We cannot capture, obviously, because of knight takes d6. Also, there are some nasty tactics here, as you will see. But we are also on top. We play rook takes a2. If white takes on a2, we take the knight. And the material count, we have to count here. We've got 2 pieces for the rook. And we've got some initiative, as knight e4 is also a threat. And white's pieces are rather misplaced. This is a good position for black. Instead, after rook a2, black has a very spectacular move, knight c7. Idea is after queen c7, there is this rook takes e6 tactic, very pretty. King d8, I think rook e8 looks very nice. King takes e8, queen c7, a nice little tactical exercise. But here we play king d8. Now white gives up this knight after all, but for a pawn, knight e6, I pick, knight takes e2. And now we take the rook, bishop e6, queen e6. Also we take the pawn on e4. White plays bishop f6, g takes f6, and knight b4, introducing the threat of knight c6 and queen e7 mate. The fourth line continues with king e8, knight c6, and king f7. We run away. Do get used to such lines. In bishop g5, neither of them are unavoidable. I tried finding systems where there is no such lines, but it's always getting messy, and always such tries and ideas pop up. But here we are running away. There's nothing to worry about. Rook d1. White tries to get the rook into play. Here we play rook e8. Stop queen e7. White goes queen c7, and we get out of the pin. Knight a7, attacking the c8 bishop, and now we have queen e5, and move repetition is forced. White plays rook d6, renewing the threat of knight takes c6, and after queen e1, rook d1, queen e5, we repeat the moves. So very obscure, rare line, but something to be aware of. Instead of queen g3, the main move is bishop d3. The idea is to bring the rook from h1 to e1, b5, rook h1, and bishop e7. Here it's very necessary to close the e file, because bishop b7 would fall into knight d5 tactic. Bishop 7. Now white plays queen g3. White needs to move the queen over to create knight d5 ideas again, perhaps f4 e5 as well. Here we play h6, asking the bishop what exactly it plans. Bishop d2 is a retreat. It's not really dangerous. If white retreats his pieces this way, we're quite fine. We push the knight with b4, knight d2, rook b8, guarding the pawn. King b1, and now g6, just to make sure that queen takes g7 is not a thing anymore, and also preparing the move e5 as well. I slightly paused because I was wondering about the move queen takes g7, but I believe rook g8, queen takes h6, and knight g4 looks very good, capturing the f2 pawn later on. So instead of bishop d2, the main line is bishop f6. That also happened in the game Nepomniachtchi against Russian young player Sarana. Black takes with the bishop. Everything looks beautiful. We have all the dark squares, but white has moved knight f5. Very interesting idea. And now ef is quite dangerous. White's got all these knight d5 things, but there are two different options I could recommend. So Sarana played a very practical move. I really liked it. Move king f8, getting out of the e file and threatening e takes f5 and forcing white to go for the endgame. Queen d6, queen d6, knight d6, and now king e7. Very classy solution. Black has a very strong dark square bishop, which more than compensates for not more, which compensates for the pawn. Definitely not more than that, of course. After knight takes c8, Sarana played rook hc8, which is very logical. You want to keep both these rooks on the queen side, where you pawn down, but actually rook ac8 was a little bit more accurate. The point is that after knight e2, g5, g3 preparing f4, g4 isolating this pawn, knight f4. Now the rook on h8 is quite useful. We can play h5, and the rook protects the pawn. So this a little improvement. Rook ac8, slightly more accurate, equalizing fully. Before this, the king f8 is more forced. And I also give that after queen d6, we have king d8. Very strong move, by the way. Both the knights are hanging. Very strong move, by the way. King d8. Keep that in mind. Knight takes d6 is the way to go. We have king f8, e5, and now fourth line bishop takes e5. Obviously, white had to do something like e5 because this knight is hanging, and bishop e5 is also a threat. e5, bishop e5, rook e5, queen d6. Material is equal. The rook is hanging. White has a very strong option, two strong options actually. So one is bishop e4. After queen e5, knight e5 forced. Rook d8 check, king 7, rook takes h8 also forced. Now the rook is hanging, so we cannot grab the knight. We have to move the rook. And after knight moves away, we have a strong idea of f5. and after bishop f3, knight g6, we keep attacking the rook that pins this bishop rather annoyingly. But after rook g8, king f7, rook d8, king e7, the rook has nowhere to go, just stuck in the endless loop here. 17 bishop g6 is an even more dangerous try. We take on e5. Also, queen b8 is, by the way, possible according to the engine. Queen e5 is more direct. Rook d7 is the fancy idea, and after queen g3, rook f7 is the intermediate check. King g8 and f takes g3. White is going to be rook down after b takes c3, but he has this beautiful mating knight with the bishop on g6. And after rook e7, we have to give up this bishop to guard our king from back rank mate. CB check first, obviously to take the pawn, king b1, and now bishop d7. And after rook takes d7, it's important that we address this bishop and kick it away with h5, intending rook h6. After rook e7, we play rook f8, h4, otherwise you might want to push h4 ourselves, rook h6, hitting this bishop, and after rook e6, we have rook f6, and white has nothing better but repeat with rook e8, rook f8, and come back. So this forced line, so two solutions for the Nepo idea of knight f5. One is this b4, which is forced, very easy, also king f8. There are even more options, but these are the easiest, most practical ones. Finally, I think we come to the move 7f4, and now bishop e7. And here, yeah, there are a few options. So queen e2, as we mentioned already, bad. In the other move order, so h6, knight e4, or also b5 is very good. So queen e2 is not a problem. Queen d2, not very good against the knight dwarf, because the e4 pawn will be in trouble after b5. Already threatening b4, knight e4. White has to go a3, now bishop d7, bishop d3, knight b d7, castle and short castle, and after queen b6, b4, we have our queenside play, whereas white's queen on d2 is quite timid. It's much more dangerous on f3, where it supports at least the g4 push and so on. At least can move over to g3 in some cases, or h3. So this is not a good setup, but by the way, something that I believe keeps happening at the lower level. It is very logical to play queen d2, and this is also the setup that happens against the classical Sicilian, which is this. Let me show it to you briefly here, which is this knight c6 instead of a6, bishop g5, e6, and now queen d2. So here it's different with knight on c6. We don't have such easy b5 idea as we have in our position. So yeah, I think this queen d2 is something you might encounter, but something you're really happy to meet after b5, a3, knight d7, bishop b7, knight d7, castle. One alternative that is interesting is e5. Honestly, didn't know about this move at all, but makes sense. Apparently, after it takes the fe, there are a few lines that I looked at. Nowhere is black better, so this is an interesting, rare system. White can employ as a surprise. Knight d7 is one of the two options, obviously. Bishop e7, queen e7. Now this pawn is weak. We will even manage to win it, but white has a straightforward play. So queen h5, good move, provoking g6, provoking some weaknesses. Castle on castle g6, and now queen e2. We can win the pawn with the check, queen g5 check, king b1, queen e5. But after queen d2, white has some compensation. He will push h4. We've got these weak dark squares, slightly behind in development. So very interesting idea for white. But instead of knight f7, I recommend knight d5. After bishop e7, there are two options. Queen e7 works well, knight e7 as well. After queen e7, knight e5 takes, knight d5. After queen e5, queen e2, the endgame is not so comfortable for black. This knight is very strong, queen d6, and knight c7 are going to be threats. But there is a move queen h4, which is very, very strong here. After g3, queen e4, king f2, we castle. And the forced line ensues. Obviously, white's king is pretty awkward on f2, but there is knight e7, king h8, queen d6. There are some concrete ideas here. Knight g6, for example, is a threat. So knight d7, bishop d3, connecting the rooks, And after queen e5, knight c8, white wins a piece, but as queen d6 is met by knight d6 and rook c8 by queen d7, but the line continues. We have rook fd8. Queen has to move, queen f5, and now there is rook takes c2, a very spectacular shot. After bishop takes c2, we have rook d2 and queen e2 checkmates. So white has to go king f1, and now we trade queens and we collect second pawn, and thanks to the second rank dominance and second rook entering, we don't run much risk here. But this is quite complicated, something to remember. Instead of queen e7, move 10, we can take with the knight, which is a little simpler. Here I play queen g4, we go h5, queen e4, and now I like to play knight e6, and the other knight will develop to d7, so like the most efficient way of employing our knights, hitting this e5 pawn. Knight f3 here, knight d7, long castle, queen c7. All the pieces are aiming at the weak e5 pawn, rook e1, and now b5. Here I look at two options. Bishop b5 is one. The sac, always some sacrifices, and the bishop g5, knight of take, knight b5, queen b6, knight d6, king d8, knight f7, king c7, running away from the king side at the cost of the rook. And if white takes the rook, we take on a2, and we are the ones attacking. White should play a3 instead, and after rook f8, knight d6, king b8, we managed to get our king some safety, but white does have these 3 pawns. For the piece or position is around balanced. We want to play next rook a7 and knight to c5, and our king is pretty safe on b8 here. Instead of 16 bishop takes b5, white can play simply 16 bishop d3, then we go bishop b7, just finish our development. The queen has to move out of the x-ray, queen e3, and now long castle. The king is pretty safe here. Move it over to b8, and after rook f1, king b8, black is doing pretty well. The e5 pawn is a constant target. We cannot win it, but white cannot move his knight because of that, so he's tied to this pawn, and black has a comfortable position here. Again, this is us being two steps ahead, because nobody played the move. I mean, people played it, but nobody played it consciously. Nobody prepared it at the high level, or nobody recommended it anywhere. So just being a few steps ahead, guys, just to be sure. Queen f3 is the main move, and it's time to look at it. Queen c7, again, very important. By the way, very important. Cannot stress it enough not to go knight bd7 because of bishop c4, the extra option. When bishop e6 is a huge threat, because g7 pawn is hanging after takes, knight takes, as well as the queen. So queen c7, this is our move order. And here a long castle is what they play automatically, but we have to look at the alternatives. Better safe than sorry, as they say. So g4 is just bad here, wrong move order. We can play h6 first, bishop h4, and now g5, fg, knight d7. And we got this e5 square for the knight. This is a thematic idea, but it works very well here when white wasted time on g4 instead of castling. So works very well, just very good position for black here. G4 not good. 9 bishop d3. After knight d7, we'll transpose to long castle because white has to castle long. I mean, castling short makes just no sense. We'll just develop. Excuse me. To b7, yes. And f5 is interesting though, and that is one move that I actually had to spend a bit of time analyzing. Very interesting idea here. The point is simple. White doesn't want to allow knight bd7 and puts pressure on the e6 pawn right away. There are two options here: to start with h6, bishop h4, knight c6, or play knight c6 immediately. After checking them both thoroughly, I've decided knight c6 is better. There are here two options, and it's quite funny. Long castle. Here I spent a bit of time studying knight takes d4, rook d4, b5, and you can find these notes as well in the chapter. But it occurred to me at some point that after knight a5, we transpose to another line that appeared after 9 long castle, knight bd7, and here f5, and here knight e5, and yeah, so I could have saved me some time just But yeah, I realized that there is a strong position only after I've completed this chapter. Basically, long castle knight e5 is something we will look at later. Knight d4, rook d4, b5 is an extra option here, and it's fine for black as well. Knight takes e6 is very principled here, a very interesting new idea. B takes c6, we're reinforcing our center and opening the b file. So in general, this knight takes c6 concepts are quite fresh. Previously, it was simply considered always that opening the b file is deadly for white, but it seems that it's not so simple. It's all concrete. So this is an interesting position for white. Here, white has two options. There is a long castle, and there's also the move g4, and they are slightly different. After long castle, we take on f5 immediately before white gets to play g4. After ef, e castle short. Bishop d3 is a move. We play here d5. Same reaction after g4. We again play d5. It's very important to play d5 to open the bishop, which could be relevant after rook b8, queen a5, and then rook b2, bishop a3. Things are in the air. Also support knight e4 sometimes. So d5 a very important move to make. Line continues with bishop f4, queen a5, and g5. And here a very, very nice solution, knight e4, knight takes e4, d takes e4, queen a4. And here, very strong idea, a nice puzzle for you to solve, but better to know it. Bishop takes f5, queen e7, and queen a4. A nice double attack on the c2 pawn and the f4 bishop, and black is just in time to equalize after bishop d3, queen takes f4. A line like that is pretty good to know. So, for example, if you are looking for a weapon with white, I think this is an interesting try to surprise your opponent until obviously everybody's bought my course and everybody already knows everything. But 11 g4 instead of long castle. Also possible now. Ef doesn't anymore look so attractive because white can recapture with the g pawn, and here we strike with d5. Again, important to open this bishop for this counterplay on the b file to be effective. Long castle rook b8. B file obviously has to be grabbed. And here I look at three options, in fact. So after bishop f4, we play e5, bishop g3, and now a short castle. Some forced lines ensue here. After g5, we take on e4, knight e4, d takes e4, queen e4, and take on g5. Very important that we got rid of the g5 pawn, and with bishop on f6, we will cement our king side and be very safe. Instead, there is 15th move h4, preparing g5. Now, this is a very concrete position. Obviously, if white were to get his g5 and nothing were to happen to his own king, he would be rolling. But we have, of course, also our own plans. We go d4, knight e4, and now queen a5, very strong, threatening queen a2, but also some rook takes b2 ideas, which are there after bishop c4, knight takes e4, queen e4, and rook b2. Now, quite beautifully, white is losing after king b2, bishop a3 check, king a1 is met by queen c3, so white has to go to b1, and now after queen b4 check, it is a very fortunate for us that white cannot cover with bishop b3 because he loses his e4 queen, the queen takes e4. So that's very important. So instead of king takes b2, white has to go for queen e5. I think the endgame is equal already, but black can play 4 more, queen a3, threatening all kinds of discoveries with the rook. After queen b2, queen g3, we're threatening currently bishop a3, but also bishop f6 is there once white defends from bishop a3, and white has just long-term issues with his king. I believe white has some kind of way to equalize here, but it's on him to find it. So very good position here for black. Again, this d5, queen a5, rook b2 theme is constantly there with this rook on the b8 square, so keep that in mind. 13 e5, knight d7 will transpose to f takes e6 first, so let's look at that, fe, fe, and now e5. The idea is that we obviously cannot take the pawn because of bishop f4. We play knight d7, and after bishop e7, king e7, we have an interesting position. Our king is in the center, but the center is quite closed. The structure is resemblant a little bit of the French structure. King is pretty safe here, but it still continues. So rook e1. White does need to protect the e5 pawn nonetheless. And here there are options, but I like the idea of king d8. Also give queen b6 as an option, but king d8 is quite nice. We want to play queen b6 and then move our king over to c7, where it's quite safe, hidden behind our pieces. Queen g3, queen b6, knight d1, king c7, and next we want to employ our pieces with knight c5, bishop d7, and it's a very unclear position. So when continues with g5, knight c5, bishop d3, bishop d7, very unclear position. King on c7 is pretty safe for now. But of course, white king is probably safer. That said, we have all sorts of strategic ideas of bishop e8, and then getting the bishop to g6 after the trade. And we have this very strong structure, and the e5 pawn potentially in an endgame would be weak. So a very interesting double-edged position. In fact, yeah, pretty interesting line, this f5. Again, we're being far ahead of the current theory. I don't think there are a lot of high-level games here, but good to know. Good to know. Long castle, knight b7. Now here there are two moves: bishop d3, g4, but there are also sidelines, as always. So let's look at those. Bishop d3 and g4 obviously will be looked at in separate chapters. They each deserve a separate big chapter. In fact, g4 even gets 2 chapters from me. So here we look at alternatives. Bishop f6 here is just too early. Before g4 we can take with bishop f6, and after g4 we have this extra option of g5, fighting for the dark squares. Bishop f6 also very strange. Nobody would do that. Bishop e2. Yeah, this is good to know. Good to know. So there is a variation with h6, bishop h4, knight b7, which is black trying to confuse white players with that. And now after g4, as well as bishop d3, black has move ordered white one way or the other. And instead here, white has a very strong move in bishop e2. And that's why some players get confused and play it here as well. But here it is not so good. Now the difference is after we play b5, there with the pawn on h6, bishop on h4, white takes on f6, knight f6 plays e5, hitting both knight and the rook, which is not a big deal, of course, because of bishop b7, but then they continue with queen g3, and then after d takes e5, f takes e5, knight d7. If the h7 pawn is on h6, white has knight takes e6 tactic, f takes e6, and some sort of a queen g6 obviously with pawn on h6, you have to imagine, thing, and that is very good for white. But the situation is completely different with pawn on h7. Here, black is just winning, or has a big advantage. White has a desperate sacrifice with bishop b5, but it's not good. We take knight db5, queen c5, important. We don't take the pawn because that would allow knight c7. So we play queen c5. And only after queen takes g7 do we take now on e5. And now after knight c7 we can take on c7, queen h8, knight f8. We have 2 bishops for rook, but these bishops are monster bishops and our king is super safe. Black is actually just winning. So bishop e2, b5, bishop f6 is simply not working, and then bishop e2 is not a good move because after a3, which is quite slow, we go bishop b7, rook e1, castle. And here, to make sense of this move on bishop e2, white can play queen g3. In fact, white can still do this. It's not too bad for him. There is some points to that. The queen is pretty well placed here, and there is no knight h5. But we play rook fc8. It is better to play rook fc8 here than rook ac8. We got this bishop f8 option and rook a to b8 as well. So this is right here. After bishop d3, we play knight h5. e5 was coming. And after queen h4, we can take on g5. Now, if white takes with the queen, we can play knight hf6. And having traded these bishops, we are pretty safe. Dark square bishops, I mean. White can play fg. And here we go g6. Well, it's a very unusual pawn structure that white has, but after bishop e2, there is an option, of course, of going knight g7, but sorry, knight to g7. And if white comes over, try to go passive, but much stronger is to go for counterplay with b4, ab, a5. We had seen this idea. If you're watching my series in the chronological order, you've seen it before. And now, yes, b5, a4 is very good. We want to play a3. If the knight moves from c3, we'll push e5, and then the knight from d4 cannot move because c2 is hanging. And if after a5 white played knight d5, we have queen b6. I believe rook d6 will have also a check on e3. So white takes on a5, and after queen a5, we have lots of open files there. There's a queen coming to a1. If necessary, bishop a6 currently a threat. And note that bishop h6, gh6 is not a big deal. It's pretty typical way of slowing white down, or in fact black in some cases. In reverse situations, white could also, I'll just show you now. In some cases, obviously, white could sometimes put the knight on a4, and if we attack it, then play b3 and capture b takes a4. This does slow us down quite a bit. So this idea is there, and yeah, in this case, white doesn't deliver mate here, while our attack is a bit more dangerous. This for bishop e2 again could happen, especially if your opponent gets confused, but not a great line. And now finally there's move 10f5. Knight e5 is not forced, but something I recommend. We also should know this line by the move order f5, knight c6 from castle, obviously. Now knight a5, same thing. Instead of knight e5, e5 is also being played, but I'm not sure if knight b3, b5, takes knight d5. Yeah, these positions are always strange. Knight d5 easy. White does have this e4 square. We do have a pretty safe king, of course, behind this pawn wall, but white does have this e4 square, and I'm not quite sure if knight d2 to e4. We can, of course, push our queenside, but I am never sure what exactly this queenside push brings us. We don't have so many pieces attacking. The bishop is passive. This bishop is also not going to deliver checkmate or anything. So this is a very risky position strategically, and I would like to stay away from it, especially because knight e5 is a good move here. Knight e5, queen h3, we can castle. e6 pawn is not hanging, which is a relief. We have knight f4 and all kinds of tricks. There's knight f2 incoming. So after queen h3 we can castle. Now white goes bishop e2, stopping knight g4 for now. And here we have to play h6. It's important to include that. The sacrifice doesn't work. We can take bishop h6, gh, queen h6, now knight h7. In general, knight h7 is very often a reply against these kind of sacrifices. Knight controls this g5 square, and bishop gets the room via f6, h4, bishop f6. Excuse me. Rook h3, queen e7. All the pieces come closer to the king, and as long as we control this f6 square and control it very well, white has nothing here at all. Instead of bishop takes h6, there is also the move bishop h4. Well, basically the only move that is good. And after b5, now if white takes on e6, we take and play queen a7. This is quite complicated, has to be studied. So we want to play knight h7 next. The knight is sort of stuck on e6, but white did win a pawn. So the line continues with rook hf1. I believe it's a forced line. Knight h7. Again, then the knight is still the same situation. Knight on e6 is pinned. I'll make it red. Bishop e7, queen e7. Now knight d5. Forced line continues. Takes, and knight c7. So white gave up that knight that was stuck, but is going to win back in exchange. We play bishop d7, giving up an exchange instead of the bishop. And after knight takes 8, rook 8, rook d6, white has 2 pawns for exchange. 2 pawns and a rook for 2 pieces, which in terms of material is even more than enough. But here in this particular position, we have a beautiful outpost for our pieces. The knight on e5 is not going to be touched after knight f6, and the e4 pawn is also a target, and white's 2 pawns are not felt. Our king is coming to e7, and excuse me, and this is a very safe position for black. So definitely something to be aware of in general, that you can and should give the e6 pawn. So yes, but again, the sideline is something I have also had no idea about before the series, just some very obscure stuff that can be quite interesting. After b5, there's also a3 instead of f6. Now we play rook b8, and I give a very nice line, by the way, instructive line. So both sides go for attack, g4. Now, quite interestingly, both sides have these hooks, the pawn hooks. White gets to open the g file with g5 because of the pawn h6, and we get to open the b file with b4 because of the pawn a3. So both sides get their files open against the king. Very exciting. b4 takes takes, g5 takes takes, and now I have to play, obviously, very quick dynamic chess. Queen e5, the queen joins the attack. If king b1, we take, go queen b6, hitting both the knight and the pawn on b2, knight b3. Now we sacrifice rook b3. You know, in such positions, there's no time to waste. We sacrifice, take, queen takes, and we have knight e4 trick incoming. And even after rook d4, we go knight e4. Very strong idea. And after rook e4, we take bishop takes g5. And now we managed to stabilize our king a little bit. We've got our bishop on f6 potentially, and the king is pretty safe. Rook h4 is not there because of this strong bishop. Next we want bishop b7 and bring the rook to b8 and start counterattack. So a very strong idea. I mean, knight e4, just very fascinating tactic. So fascinating. I even have to think a little bit. I think after bishop e7, bishop f5 is the beautiful point. Yeah, very beautiful point. Now, if queen f5, there is knight takes c3. Very instructive too. After queen a5, the move knight b3. Now here are obviously those who already understood my my point. We do not go back. Of course, we sacrifice the exchange. Rook takes b3. The time factor is much more important than material when it comes to attacks and opposite side castling. So cb, e takes f5, e takes f5. Bishop b7, it's not about the rook on h1 that we attack, but about bringing the rook to c8. Rook h1, white also tries his best to create some threats. We go rook c8. White has to go king b1, and now a very forced sequence. We need to get something going. So knight e4, bishop e7, knight c3, bc, rook c3. So we're getting towards white's king. Bishop e4 is also in there. And now it's also white who starts his attack. He goes rook to h7. Again, it's not about material. It's all about initiative and tempo moves. So rook g7, g7, rook g1, knight g6. We are not mated by force. Fortunately, we have the knight still guarding the king. f6, king g8, rook takes g6. White has to keep on going. If he gives us moves the queen, let's say somewhere, gives us a chance to give a check, we'll just give a checkmate. So white has to keep checking. Rook g6, the only check. Fg, queen, and now bishop c4. Important to get the h3 square for the queen. I believe if queen h6, king h8, there he runs out of check. So bishop c4 first, and now after takes, then queen h6 check, king h8, and he's got a perpetual with queen h3. A very instructive line. Not so much because this is going to happen in many of your games, because I believe this is a sideline nobody's usually playing, but just to give you a good idea of how to handle sharp positions and a good demonstration of you know, tempo play and not shying away from sacrifices. Just every move is aimed at attack, and when both sides are playing perfect chess, then yeah, this kind of beautiful variations can occur. I believe we've gone through all of the sidelines. To sum it up, queen e2 bad on move 7. f3 queen e2 setup of Magnus, possible, but we're not impressed. Queen f3 setup of Nepo, also possible. Important there, by the way, just one small note. Important there to play bishop e7, move 10, bishop b7, knight d5 would be losing, so take care of this x-ray. And finally, after f4, bishop e7, yes, queen e2 is bad, queen d2 is bad. E5 is an interesting new idea, but especially these ideas of f5 after queen f3, queen e7, f5 here, or f5 after long castle knight d7. Yeah, these are very interesting attempts that white usually doesn't go for, but something to be aware of. And perhaps you can try it also as white. So that was for sidelines. Next up, bishop d3 and g4 chapter. So see you there.